Okay, part 8. Buying information in the mana compression lecture. Upon my return to Ehrenfest via the teleportation circle, Charlotte was the first to run up to me. Hang on. Okay, there we go. Welcome home, sister. I heard that you were first in class for the first years. That's amazing, she exclaimed. Her praise sent me straight to heaven. Hearing her call me amazing made literally everything I had gone through worth it. I'm home, Charlotte. I aim to be first in class next year as well, I replied, eager to earn my little sister's praise once again. I made sure to clench my fists as I made a declaration to emphasize the strength of my resolve. Charlotte blinked in surprise, then she copied me and clenched her fist as well. I, too, will aim to achieve first in class when I join the academy next year. I am your little sister, after all. Then we shall work together. We smiled at each other as we left the teleportation hall. Our attendants followed us out, so there were students waiting behind us to come over, but Wolfred and his retainers were still hanging around outside the door. Things soon got pretty cramped as a result. Wolfred, would you mind moving? I asked. We wish to return to our rooms. Sorry, everyone. Let's get out of their way. Just as we all started to walk, however, there came an echoing cry from somewhat far away. Rosemine! I recognized the voice at once. It was Bonifacius. Oh, boy. Here, I called back with my hand raised. I wasn't sure whether he could even see that, considering I was surrounded by people, but he found me soon enough regardless. I heard you were top of your class, he gushed. Good job, that's my granddaughter for you. Grandfather, I was also chosen as an honor student, Cornelius noted. Oh, you too, Cornelius? My grandchildren sure are smart. Excellent. Rah! Bonifacius grunted as he plucked Cornelius from the group, spun him around, and then threw him up into the air. Ah! What the fuck? I mean, dude, Cornelius is what? How old at this point? I don't even know. 12, 13? Something like that? You picking him around, spinning him around? Jesus Christ. I have to admire the amount of strength it must take to pick up and throw a man who's almost come of age. Okay, so almost 13, 14. As I blinked in awe, 2 large hands slid under my arms. You're next, Rosemine. Here, up you go. Grandfather, no! Cornelius shouted the very moment he landed on the ground, but it was too late. I was already in the air. The speed at which I, someone with the body of a child who had only recently had their baptism, and Cornelius, someone who had the body of an almost adult man, were thrown couldn't even be compared. Ah! I screamed. Wait, no! Oh shit, you threw it too hard! You threw it too hard! Oh no! Who's gonna catch her? It's either gonna be Cornelius, or possibly somebody else. Wait, no! Bonifacius let out a panicked shout, but there was nothing he could do. I was already mere moments away from crashing into the ceiling. Thank you. As everyone cried out, Cornelius alone leaped up, grabbed my cape, and pulled me back down. Thank God. His quick use of enhancement magic had saved me from my collision course, but my cape was fastened around my throat. Uh-oh, he had choked her. I could only gag as my airway was abruptly blocked. I'm gonna die! No, I don't think you're gonna die. To make matters worse, the direction of my momentum had suddenly changed, and now I was falling down toward Cornelius. I plummeted as though I was a silent meteor, no longer even able to speak. I was caught by none other than Kartstead, who had returned to Ehrenfest ahead of time with Sylvester. Thank God. He secured me in his arms, looked around to make sure that nobody else was hurt, and just checked that I was simply dazed and not actually injured. He then entrusted me to Riarda before fixing Bonifacius with a stern glare. Father, why would you ever do that to Rosemine? He barked. My retainers were all gathered around me. They knew that Bonifacius' actions were the result of his extreme and evidently dangerous love for me as his granddaughter, and so they responded only with harsh looks. But had he been anyone else, he would have been arrested on the spot for attempting to murder a member of the archducal family. Well, he didn't do it on purpose, but still. Bonifacius faltered with wavering eyes as he endured the reprimanding stares of all those around us. Then he clapped his hands together in realization. Well, I was actually testing Cornelius to make sure he has what it takes to protect Rosemine. He paused, of course. Or passed, of course. That's my grandson for you. It was the worst attempt at damage control that I had ever seen. Karstead planted his feet firmly on the ground and crossed his arms. Father, stay away from Rosemine. You're going to end up killing her one day, he declared flatly, paying no mind to Bonifacius' cry of disbelief that immediately followed. Cornelius, you did well protecting Rosemine from Father. Rosamund, you weren't even given a chance to recover from your teleportation sickness before you were tossed up into the air. You should spend today resting. Yes, Father. The shock of the whole situation had rendered me unable to move as Riarda carried me back to my room. It was strange having all of my retainers follow me around as they did in the Royal Academy. But they would henceforth be working even in the castle. Things would probably be going to be a lot busier from now on. Welcome home, Lady Rosamund oddly said once I was back in my room. She had prepared everything for my return, meaning I could climb straight into my already made bed. I rolled onto my side as soon as I was under the covers. My head was still spinning from my impromptu flight, and I was still feeling comfortably unqueasy. Somebody please teach Grandfather to control himself. Please. Yes, please be more careful when it comes to Rosamund. My retainers had their own luggage to deal with, so they all dispersed shortly after introducing themselves. Their jobs in the castle would be explained to them tomorrow. Daniel would take the lead when it came to dividing work among my guards, while Riarda and Ottilie were due to teach my apprentice retainers what they would be expected to do in the castle. I was going to be attending a meeting with the Archduke alongside my apprentice scholars that afternoon, so Hartmut was currently receiving an explanation on how we sorted out this information. Previously, we sorted the information like so, and purchased what we needed from those who gathered information in the Royal Academy. We expect the same higher-ups of the knights and scholars to be attending this time as well, I said. Information would probably sell pretty nicely, considering that this year they would need all sorts of information as they headed into the Archduke Conference. As Hartmut was sorting through the information, I turned to Feline. We will also need to arrange compensation for those in the dormitory who did transcribing work for us. Do you have a list of who transcribed what, as well as how much ink and paper they used? Yes, it's all detailed in this sheet here. Thank you. I will have you calculate the fees then. We will need to ask Ferdinand to prepare the payment for us. I started teaching Feline how to calculate the fees for each of the transcribed books. A look at the list she had provided showed a lot of names not from Ehrenfest. Did you make many friends in other duchies, Feline? The sum you offered for transcribing books is higher than usual, Lady Rosamund, so students from other duchies wanted to participate too. I simply arranged the work for them. I taught Feline how to make a profit by charging a referral fee for the transcribing work, Hartmut said. He may not have been an archnoble, but he evidently had the skills of a natural-born merchant. Nice! Benno would like him. He would love this guy. It seemed that Feline had made quite a considerable amount of money, too. She couldn't help but smile as she informed me she might have saved just enough to learn the mana compression method. Nice! Because that's expensive. It was afternoon by the time all the information was sorted out, and we were due to negotiate with the higher-ups. I couldn't just bring all of my retainers along, so I chose a select few. Riarda and Brunhilde as attendants, Hartmut and Feline as scholars, and Daniel, Angelica, and Cornelius as guard knights. Judith and Lenore were going to be spending the afternoon training with Bonifacius. Oh, I feel so bad for them! When will I get to guard Lady Rosamund? Judith cried out, her violet eyes wet with tears. She had spent the entire term in the Royal Academy off-duty, and now she was having to wait even longer. Unfortunately, there was no helping it. Bonifacius' training is important for the guard knights of all members of the Royal Archducal family. Give it your all, Daniel said. Whether his intention was to console or encourage her, I couldn't quite tell. After seeing Judith and Lenore off to the training grounds, I climbed into Leslie and drove to a meeting room near the Archduke's office. Wolfrid and his retainers had also been summoned so that they could provide information on the time I was absent. All right, Sylvester began. How about you tell me what you all learned in the Royal Academy this year? The scholars who had gathered information described the changing trends, the newly invented magic tools, and the danger levels of several duchies. In turn, the higher-ups of the various specialties asked questions, noted down changes from last year, and discussed what was new. Eventually, it came Hartmut's turn to speak. We have learned a lot about Ehrenbach's internal situation through contacts made by the children of the former Veronica faction, he said. We've what? Sylvester exclaimed, his eyes wide with surprise. Woo! Ferdinand's lips curved into an amused grin. Due in part to your orders, students were staying clear of Ehrenbach and the Royal Academy, but when Lord Wilfrid started to attend, I observed renewed closeness between students of our duchies, so I explained the situation, exploited the opportunity. Would you consider this treason to Ehrenfest? No, we want as much of this information as we can get now that we're keeping socializing to a minimum. With support from Ferdinand, Hartmut started to give his report. It seemed that Ehrenbach was a total mess internally at the moment. We put together everything we've learned and concluded that they have almost no Archduke candidates suited to be the next Archduke. Hartmut said, the mana of the family meant to support the Archduke has decreased dramatically. Their provinces are likely suffering greatly as a result, though. We do not know any specifics since none of our sources were able to provide any details. One thing we know for sure, however, is that Ehrenbach has only 2 candidates suited to become the next Archduke, one of whom is Lady Georgine's youngest daughter, Lady Ditlinde. This was news to Ehrenfest's higher-ups. They all fell into thought, looking immensely shocked. Only 2, you say? But what about the children of the former first and second wives? My older sister had 3 children, too. How do they only have 2 candidates? And maybe for the same reason that their ranking is falling despite them being a greater duchy at the moment. We do not know whether Lady Ditlinde is approaching Lord Wilfrid because he is of Ehrenbach blood and she seeks the Archduke's seat or because she is looking for a husband to wed and wishes to avoid the seat. Either way, we know that she is quite a troubling predicament, Hartman said, concluding his report. Ferdinand let out a long sigh and started rubbing his temples. Then he looked at Hartman with great interest. That was unexpected news. Excellent work. What would you say about coming to work for me? No! You've already got somebody. You got justice. So leave Hartman alone. Let me stop you there, Ferdinand. Hartman is my scholar, I interjected. Oh, he's getting the fridge. Promptly shutting down his ballsy attempt to take my retainer. He's going to serve as an important aide and will invariably shoulder the printing industry. Do not even think about taking him from me. Hartman responded with a sensible chuckle of amusement. That is a very appealing offer, Lord Ferdinand, but I'm afraid I must decline. I need to stay by Lady Rosemine's side so I can properly research her. Oh crap, should I have let Ferdinand have him to save myself? He's gonna use her as a test subject. Oh my god. You are researching Rosamine? Ferdinand asked, his brow furrowed. She certainly is an amalgamation of notably bizarre peculiarities. But what exactly are you focusing on? There was a sparkle in Hartmut's orange eyes as he responded. Her way of granting blessings differs from what is normal. That is what I wish to research. A fascinating research topic, to be sure. Come show me your results so I can see how far you have progressed. As you wish. I was hoping to be granted the opportunity to ask you some questions, Lord Ferdinand, since you knew her during her temple days. Oh, no. I feel as though a terrible alliance has just been formed. I decided to put aside the weirdos being weird and focus on the matter at hand. Each piece of information gathered at the Royal Academy was assigned an appropriate value, and this value determined how much each information gatherer was paid. Ferdinand, I would also like to compensate those who have transcribed books for me, I said. Please put aside a portion of my budget for those payments. That will not be a problem, but why so soon? Can they not be paid at a later date? I instructed the students who wish to learn my mana compression method to earn their own money. It is for this reason that I will need to pay them before my lecture begins. I went on to explain how an archnoble had complained to me about having to earn his own money, which Ferdinand responded to with exasperation. But he didn't criticize my decision. By the way, have you decided who shall be taught my compression method yet? Yes, we have already contacted those who have been granted permission. As it turned out, we will be teaching Wilfrid, the Archducal family's retainers, including my new retainers, and the Gieb houses related to my family. That meant Bonifacius, the Leisgangs, the Haldenzales, and Traugott. Not everyone was pleased about Traugott being included, but I had made a promise to him that I intended to keep. Far be it from me to inspire some petty revenge by spiting him here. Not to mention he was suffering so much at the Academy with justice as his attendant that I thought allowing him a little hope was for the best. How did inquiring about the children of the former Veronica faction go, I asked. It will depend on faction movements and Ehrenbach's actions at the Archduke Conference. Our current intention is to give them 2 options. They can wait until they come of age and are able to select a faction themselves, or they can accept magic contracts with more restrictive terms. Do you have any particular thoughts on this? We cannot allow them to sign with no restrictions whatsoever. If that is what you have all determined to be appropriate, then I shall agree. I am satisfied as long as the children do not have their futures closed off entirely. Refusing them flat out was much too sad, but I was completely fine with the enforcement of terms that required them to put in a great deal of work. The children of the former Veronica faction knew more about faction politics than I did, so I was sure that none of them expected to be embraced outright. I will deliver the payment 2 days from now, Ferdinand said. Oh, and that reminds me, Rosamine, if you wish to summon the planting company to once again sell books at the end of winter, you will need to apply for permission soon. Oh, right, we sell books at the end of winter. I took out my diptych and wrote down that I needed to request permission for the planting company. I would submit it as soon as my meeting was over. 2 days later, it was time to pay those who had gathered information for us in the Royal Academy. The students were lined up with excited expressions with my retainers among them. Riarda, Daniel, and I were sitting opposite them, among those providing the compensation. As I handed each person their payment, I gave them words of encouragement and conveyed any praise spoken by the higher-ups, much like I had the previous year. The Knight Commander was very pleased with your findings, assisted one student. The Ob scholars used this to send their regards, I told another. Even the arch-noble child puffed out his chest upon receiving our commendations, positively beaming at the moment the money he had made himself. It was heartwarming to see the satisfied smile of a job well done. Lady Rosamond, I've saved up all the money I need. Now I can buy your mana compression method. Indeed, may we meet again during my lecture. Once the payments were complete, the mana compression method lecture was scheduled for the next day. We didn't have much time before the feast celebrating spring. I returned to my room while praising my retainers for their hard work. Lady Rosamond, will you be teaching the fourth step too? Angelica asked. She already knew the normal method, so this extra stage was all that she cared about. It made sense considering that this alone had been her motivation to finish her classes. I will teach you, Angelica, since you passed your classes in time, but the plan is to only teach the fourth step of my retainers. The others will receive an opportunity to be taught it at a later date, on a separate occasion, after everyone else has learned the standard method, I explained. Everyone looked very pleased, but Feline wore the happiest smile of all. She had gathered information just as Hartmut had taught her, and even put her all into transcribing works, which had resulted in her earning enough money to afford the method her efforts had at last paid off. I see you are pleased, Feline. Absolutely, now I can learn the mana compression method alongside everyone else, she said, her cheeks flushing a warm pink. She had been born into a lay noble family that was by no means wealthy, and so she had been forced to endure going without even ever getting what she wanted since she was born. She knew that her parents wouldn't have been willing to cover the necessary expenses, so she was overjoyed about having earned enough to cover them herself. Things have been especially difficult ever since Mother died, and Father had to remarry, Feline continued. I am truly glad that you made a book of my mother's stories, Lady Rosamond. She hadn't said it outright, but it was very heavily implied that she and her younger brother had suffered greatly due to being the children of a previous wife. Feline considered the stories passed down to her by her mother her most precious memories. She had such a strong attachment to books making because she wanted to forever preserve them in physical form. My 2-year slumber had delayed this process, but she had spent her days writing them all down so that she wouldn't forget. There was an occasion when my stepmother confiscated all the stories I had written, but Father gave them back to me. He said it was because you had given me the paper, Lady Rosamond. If one treated gifts from the Archducal family without respect, it was impossible to say what twists and turns might follow, or what disaster might be brought to one's family. It was for this reason that Feline's father had made it clear that nobody was to touch her paper. Their treatment of us has been much crueler since the summer when they had a new child. I am terribly worried about how my little brother has fared while I'm away, Feline said. As my retainer, she would always ask for a room in the castle. She could always ask for a room in the castle if she wished, but her little brother hadn't even been baptized yet, so she didn't even consider this an option. Your little brother surely has the divine protection of the gods as well, I said. I thank you, Lady Rosamond. The next day when I was due to teach my mana compression method, Feline didn't show up to work. An ordonnance came to inform me that she was ill of health, but in the distant background of the message I could hear her scream, "Give me back my money!" I need to go help her, I said, immediately moving to stand up. Lady Rosamond, Hartmut placed a hand on my shoulder to stop me. There are many, many nobles gathered here to learn your method. There is no time to go to Feline. Are you telling me to abandon her, then? I am not, and I know that you would never abandon her no matter what I advise. Rather, I am saying I believe it best to postpone providing her with assistance. I know well the extent of your compassion, but abandoning a promise with this many arch-nobles for the sake of a single lay noble is simply not something that can be forgiven. Hello, you do know that you're supposed to be protecting those in your faction. Who knows what the nobles would say to Feline afterward? They would unquestionably blame her, Cornelius said. Daniel concurred. Your behavior will impact Feline's reputation as well. Furthermore, they have only taken her money, Riarda noted. Her life is not in danger. You can teach her the method at a later date when you teach us the fourth step. For now, I must ask that you please contain your emotions, Hartmut concluded. Everyone was in agreement. I wanted to declare that I was going to help her regardless, but I clenched my fist and swallowed down the words. Very well, I conceded. I will teach the nobles the compression method first. My retainer circled me as we moved to the scheduled room, no doubt cautious that I might abruptly run off. By the time we arrived, a great number of nobles were already gathered. I had already taught my compression method to all of the Archducal family's guard knights, except those serving Wilfrid, so the majority of the attending nobles were scholars in attendance. There were many children here learning without their parents, since kids had a better time developing mana, and the lecture fees were anything but cheap. There were also many younger people. The primary exceptions to this were Bonifacius and the Geeb couple sitting in the front row. I couldn't help but balk a little when I saw the grandpa, who looked even older than mine. Are they really planning to borrow their mana at this point? I'm scared they're going to keel over and die as soon as they even attempt to. May I pray for a blessing and appreciation of the serendipitous meeting ordained by the harsh judgment of Abelglade, the god of life. The nobles I hadn't met before came forward to greet me one by one. The situation with Feline had me racked with anxiety and impatience, but I couldn't allow that to show on my face. So I returned the greetings with a fake noble smile. It was then that the oldest man among the grandfathers hobbled forward. He was of such an advanced age that he needed a caretaker to accompany him, and he knelt before me with tears in his eyes. I am the previous Geeb Gang. May I pray for a blessing and appreciation of the serendipitous meeting ordained by the harsh judgment of Abelglade, the god of life, he asked. You may. Now that I have met you, Lady Rosamund, I can meet my grave with no regrets. Holy cow, talk about a heavy greeting. He's literally risking his life to being here. Dear God. He was quite pushy with Count Gang about coming. As your great-grandfather, he wanted to see you at least once, Riarda whispered to me. Say what? This is my great-grandfather? The old man, weeping tears of joy over getting to see me, was apparently Cardstad's grandfather. Never before had I met one of my great-grandfathers, even in my Arano days. It appeared to be a miracle that this man was even still alive. He was old enough that it looked as though he might drop dead at any moment. He had apparently reached the point where he seldom socialized or even left his estate. I'm glad to have met you as well, great-grandfather. What? No sooner had I given him my blessing than he closed his eyes and collapsed with a thump. He's dead! Jesus fucking Christ! Drop dead in front of you, why don't you? He was completely motionless. The most I could do was stare down at him in shock. Did I cause this with my blessing, I asked? Fear not, Lady Rosamund. This happens often. He is fine. Oh, really? Sorry, but that doesn't make me feel any better. This moment of shock silence quickly turned into a buzz of whispers as my great-grandfather was carried out of the room. I was assured again and again that his life wasn't in any danger, but it sure didn't look that way. I know. Oh my God. That would freak me out, too. Attempting to learn my compression method certainly would have pushed him to climb a towering stairway, so I was at least thankful that he hadn't reached that stage. That was crazy. I thought my heart was going to stop. Never before had I witnessed someone abruptly collapse, so it was only then that I truly understood how much I had traumatized others when passing out myself. I couldn't have been more apologetic. Eventually the whispers quelled, and the current Count Gang humbly stepped forward. I am Geeb Gang. May I pray for a blessing and appreciation of this serendipitous meeting ordained by the harsh judgment of Abelglade, the god of life, he asked. You may. I deeply apologize for my grandfather shocking you so. He planned to attend the seminar as he wished to see you at least once before the supreme gods welcomed him. I too am glad to have finally met you in person, Lady Rosamund. The current Count Gang was fairly young, perhaps just a little older than Cardstad. I could feel the ambition burning in his eyes, and I suddenly understood why we previously hadn't been allowed to meet, despite us being family. This meeting had most likely only been allowed because my guardians had finally decided that Wilfried and I were to be engaged. I shall now teach my mana compression method, but first I asked for the payments to be made and the magic contracts to be signed. I gestured to the scholars who were going to be handling the payments, and then to Sylvester, who was managing the country-wide magic contracts. He would be watching carefully as everyone signed their names, both because I couldn't yet recognize everyone, and to show that this lecture was taking place under the guidance of the Archduke. Once all those participating had paid their fees and signed the contracts, I started teaching the method with Daniel as my assistant. We would only be going up to the third stage today, and as expected, showing the actual process made things a lot easier to visualize than just giving vague analogies. Many people found it simpler to compress their mana this way, and everyone there said they had never before seen folded material being stamped down. Even knowing this method, the amount of mana you can compress ultimately relies on your mental fortitude, I explained. Also know that your mana density increasing too suddenly due to rapid compression will cause mana sickness. Take care to increase your mana at a leisurely pace that will not interfere with your work. Now, anyone who got mana sickness had only themselves to blame. To think that even fully grown adults such as ourselves can increase our mana density through this artful compression. I am moved. Geeb Haldenzel said, his enthusiasm clear in his voice. This is knowledge that one could monopolize for their own benefit, and yet for the sake of the duchy, you are willing to teach it to Teach it even to competing Archduke candidates. I am left speechless at your compassion. Following these words, Geeb Holdenzel exited the room. Wolfried and his retainers were to leave shortly after, though I noticed they were all wearing very focused expressions, a clear giveaway that they were compressing their mana even as they walked. I instinctively called out to them. What is it, Rosemine? Wolfried asked. I understand that your guard knights will wish to work especially hard to compress their mana, considering that they have learned it much later than the other Archducal family retainers, but it is dangerous for all of you to compress your mana while on duty at the same time. Several of the retainers exchanged nervous grimaces. They had evidently been so focused on compressing their mana that they had forgotten their surroundings entirely. The risk of mana sickness aside, you will all want to take care not to let the compression method interfere with your guard duty. Wolfried, perhaps you should adjust your schedule to make it easier for everyone to compress their mana in order them not compress it while at work. Good point, Wolfried did not reply with a nod. He and his knights paused their attempts to compress their mana, and then together they exited the room. Once they had gone, I dashed over to where Celeste and Ferdinand were. Okay, here we go. Feline's family circumstances. Sylvester, Ferdinand, may we go rescue Feline now? I asked. Oh yeah, one of your retainers didn't come. What's with all this about rescuing her? Sylvester asked, his brow furrowed. Unfortunately, I couldn't provide more details. I know only what I had heard from the Ordonnance. I'm not sure what the full situation is, but I received an ordinance this morning. A woman was informing me that Feline was ill, but in the background, I could hear Feline screaming about her money being taken. Ferdinand, who had been tapping his temple as he listened, lowered his hand and stared at me. And you did not run off immediately? He asked, blinking incredulously. Gods, have you actually matured somewhat? All of my retainers gathered together to stop me, and my emotions have calmed somewhat since then. Or rather, my thoughts have been dominated by the sight of my great-grandfather collapsing in front of me. Now tell me, how can we rescue Feline while respecting her position and not bringing her more trouble? She worked so hard to earn money specifically so that she could attend my lecture. Her parents weren't going to cover the cost, and so she gathered information in the Royal Academy, transcribed books, gathered stories from other duchies, and ultimately put everything she had into saving up. She was so happy about getting to learn the method too. Not once had it occurred to me that Feline's parents might interfere instead of celebrating her growth. She had earned the money on her own terms precisely because her family was poor, and she knew that they wouldn't be able to pay for her. Her parents actually took money from their kids? Sylvester asked. In lay noble families, income is generally expected to go to the house, especially the earnings of underage children who still live at home, Daniel said. As lay noble himself, he was able to give us some valuable insights. Sylvester sighed. You should have held on to the money for her, Rosemine. Perhaps, but she would have needed to make such a request herself. Had I made the suggestion, it would have come across as an order, no? In truth, I had at one point considered subtracting the cost of my mana compression lecture before giving out the payments. Sylvester had said this would make things easier for us, since we wouldn't need to prepare as much money at once. But I was of the opinion that it was more satisfying, and in turn more motivating for one to receive the full amount. Nah, hindsight is 20/20 on this one, girl. You didn't know that was going to happen. By having them physically pay for the method themselves with money they had earned and not just received from their parents, I had hoped to teach the students the importance of self-investment. Of course, my decision to pay everyone the full amount had unfortunately backfired. Yep, you didn't know. I understand how you feel, but the situation has already progressed. I don't know how I feel about you interfering with someone else's family matters, Sylvester said. Feline is my retainer, and it is my duty to protect her from misfortune. Is that not what lords and ladies must do? I was taught as such when Lady Eglantine protected me in the Royal Academy. Your thought process is not incorrect. You caused nothing but problems, but I see that you were at least learning in the process, Ferdinand said, beginning to tap his temples once again as he fell into thought. I understand the role I must play, but how easily can I protect Feline? I wish to resolve this matter peacefully without causing her any harm. You getting involved in a domestic matter will make it quite the scandal. If you wish to settle things peacefully, I would suggest having your retainer earn the money again, and tell her to entrust it with you this time, Ferdinand said plainly. Doing nothing about it was the most peaceful option. But we were having this conversation specifically because I refused to turn a blind eye to this. I anxiously bit my lip, and that was when Hartman interjected. Oh no, I just realized something terrible, he said, speaking in a monotone voice like an intentionally bad actor. I cannot believe I've done this, but I gave Feline the wrong money. She must have taken home the funds we were going to pay to the students of other duchies. In other words, I gave her money that rightfully belongs to Lady Rosemine, and Lady Rosemine the money that Feline was going to spend. I knew for a fact this wasn't true. He's lying. He's trying to make it so that he do have a reason to do it. I had paid everyone in Airfest already, and the money for the other duchies was safely in my possession. I blinked confused, only for Ferdinand to chuckle. That is terrible indeed, he said. Rosemont, it seems that your retainer took home money that was intended for other duchies. This could escalate into an interduchy scandal if something is not done. This is your loophole, girl. Take it. Go forth and retrieve that which is rightfully yours, and at this time do not forget to keep the money meant for the mana compression lesson separate. It was only then that I understood what was going on. Oh my, it certainly would be terrible for this to escalate into an interduchy scandal, I said. I must go to Feline's home at once and apologize for the mistake. An unannounced visit would only escalate matters. I will explain the reason for your visit to Feline's father, Kaushik. Return home here when the money is prepared. Right. Now, if justice is on my side, I climbed into my high beast and flew to my room at once. Riarda and Ottilie welcomed me with wide eyes, having declined to learn the mana compression method themselves. Riarda, please fetch the money for the other duchies, I said, explaining the situation to them as they carried out my request. From those funds, I took out exactly as much as I had paid to Feline, and from that amount, I took out the fee for my mana compression method and a small silver. I thought it only fair for Feline to get a little money to spend on herself, rather than it all going straight to her house. Milady, would it not be wise to grant Feline a room in the castle? Riarda asked, looking notably concerned. If she is with a family that will send false reports to keep her from work, she will one day fail to carry out her duties, even if it is not her fault. She was certainly right, but Feline had a little brother as well. It was hard to imagine that she would abandon him and enter the castle alone. I will grant Feline a room if she asks for one, but I expect that she will not wish to enter the castle alone. I gave the money to Feline's family to Hartmut and then brought out my high beast. Let's go. Naturally, I couldn't impose upon a lay noble's estate by arriving with all my retainers. I needed to bring all of my guard knights, given that I was leaving the castle, but of my scholars and attendants, I could only be bringing the fastest and most flexible thinkers, Laisletta and Hartmut. We will prepare a room for her just in case, Brunhilde said. It will not do for there not to be one available. Please do. Despite being an arch-noble, Brunhilde worked with and cared for Feline as a fellow retainer in the Royal Academy. With clear worry in her amber eyes, she saw us off to the room where Ferdinand was waiting. My apologies for the wait, Ferdinand. I have finished explaining the circumstances. My sympathies, Kaushik. Rosamund has certainly thrown him into the fire with her mistake. Ferdinand directed his second sentence at a pale-faced lay scholar who was practically groveling after receiving such an abrupt summons. It was Feline's father, and so he made his submission clear. I apologize for my mistake. I truly am sorry for this. If we do not have the proper sum at hand, this will escalate into an interduchy issue. I had no idea, Kaushik stammered. He had apparently spent the winter busily gathering information about mana compression to the point that he had returned to his estate only to sleep. He consequently knew nothing of what was happening there, and was beyond dismayed to learn that they were involved in such a large-scale diplomatic issue. And so with Kaushik's guidance, we all flew to Feline's home on our high beasts. Ferdinand was accompanying us both to apologize for my mistake and to observe the proceedings. Here we are, Kaushik said as he landed at an estate in the southernmost area of the nobles' quarter, where the lay nobles lived. His house was so much tinier than the castle that the two couldn't even be compared. But from a commoner's perspective, it was large and overall quite attractive. In terms of dimensions, it was likely larger than the Offmer Company. Oh my, welcome, Feline's stepmother said as once we arrived at the parlor. She looked quite young, as one would expect from a second wife, but also rather exhausted, likely because she had given birth during the summer just past. This is urgent, Jonsara, Kaushik said. Feline apparently brought home a lot of money. Do you know anything about it? Has that girl done something? She lied about being the retainer of an archducal family member yesterday and came home with a small fortune. It was quite strange. After all, Lady Rosemont would surely never accept a lay noble into her service. Feline must have been delusional after her vow in the playroom was rejected. The truth was just too much for her to bear, Jonsara spat. She then apologized to me for all the trouble. You seem to be misunderstood, I said. Feline truly is my retainer. She was officially assigned as such at the Royal Academy. Jonsara offered no response. She merely stared at me in wide-eyed surprise. Feline spoke the truth, I restated, speaking more slowly this time to ensure there was no confusion. She is my retainer. Jonsara shook her head in disbelief, but that can't be. Feline isn't feeling well today, correct? I asked with a smile. Do allow me to see her. I will need to explain that this situation is not her fault, and then have her return the money from yesterday. But she is still unwell. Someone of poor constitution such as yourself would be at risk of attending her. If you are in a hurry, I will fetch the money for you right away, Jonsara said, panicking in such a blatantly suspicious manner. I glanced over at Ferdinand, who steadily gestured to Hartmut with his chin. He was telling me to send Hartmut in my place, So I nodded and deepened my smile. I appreciate your concern for my health. Hartmut, accompany Jonsara and ensure the proper sum is being returned. Laisletta, go in my place to express my will wishes to the ill Feline. I will wait here, so you need not worry. If going to see her myself wasn't an option, I could just send my retainers. I had no intention of going home until Feline's safety was ascertained, especially now that I had seen how maliciously Jonsara acted toward her. Daniel and Judith would be following Hartman and Laisletta as guards when they came to money-related problems. The more witnesses, the better. Not long after they all exited the parlor, we heard a large slamming sound and a scream coming from somewhere deeper in the house. I instinctively went to get up from my seat, but Ferdinand extended a hand beneath the table to stop me. Meanwhile, Angelica and Neckar drew their weapons and assumed defensive stances. However, nothing followed but silence. The lack of any report or contact made me feel sick. My apologies. I will go check on them, Koshik said. Just as he moved to leave the parlor, however, Daniel shouted, "Get out of the way!" "Feline!" I cried. Daniel entered the room with Feline wrapped in his cape. There was a painful-looking mark on her face, and her grass-green eyes were wet with tears. Behind them were Laisletta and a young boy of around 5 years of age who was clearly not being treated well. Okay, that's her brother. Okay. Okay, so something must have happened. "Feline, what in the world just happened?" I asked. She looked my way in a daze, and her eyes shot open as though she had suddenly come back to reality. Lady Rosemine raised my... I cannot talk. Lady Rosemine, please, save my brother. Save Conrad, she choked out. Feline went on to explain that Jonsara was abusing Conrad and that she had taken away his life-saving magic tool, the one given to all noble children that sucked out and stored their mana in face stones until it was time for them to attend the Royal Academy. Jonsara had drained the mana from his magic tool, and Phase Stones then unregistered his mana from his magic tool, which she had given to her newborn baby instead. You bitch. She had been able to do all this unopposed since Koshik was barely at home during winter socializing, and Feline had been at the Royal Academy. At this rate, he's going to die, Feline wailed. He's already filled with mana. However, this is a domestic matter. It is not an issue for Rosemine, the daughter of the Archduke, to oversee. Ferdinand stepped in faster than I could open my mouth. He was clearly telling Feline and me to think carefully before speaking. I clenched my fists on my lap. Indeed, it is as Lord Ferdinand says, this is a domestic dispute, and not for one for Lady Rosemine to concern herself with, Jonsara said venomously. Feline, you must not display such arrogance simply because you were chosen as a retainer. Know your place. She was standing by the door with her newborn in her arms, watching us with defensive eyes and showing no intention of entering the parlor. She was cradling her baby and the magic tool as though they were precious treasures. However, I was not about to let this fly. Noble children would die without magic tools to drain their mana in the same way that commoners with the devouring would. I knew better than anyone how it felt to die slowly as the heat consumed you. Ferdinand, I do not wish to let Conrad die. A child that has not yet been baptized is not even considered a person. The newborn baby isn't either! Hello? Hello? Do you not understand that? The newborn baby isn't a person either. But Conrad's going to be coming of age, or getting his baptism in a couple of years. It was the same thing he had said to me countless times before. I squeezed my eyes shut. That way of thinking was something I would never get used to. How could one see a child standing right before them and not even consider them alive? As this is a domestic dispute, I certainly have no place in it, but I refuse to overlook the life-threatening condition of this child. What do you think of this, Koshik? I asked, turning to him, since he was more directly involved in the situation. I was aware of my wife's wish, but I did not think she would forcibly go through with it while I was away, he replied. In other words, he hadn't purchased the magic tool even after Jonsara had consulted him about the matter. This was enough to convince me that a conclusion had been made, a conclusion to raise only one of their children. What will you do then? Will you purchase a new magic tool? Our house does not have the funds to do such a thing. We shall prioritize the child with more mana. Father! Feline shrieked in protest, but Koshik stating his intentions before me had finally finalized the decision. It was only natural for a noble house to prioritize those with the most mana, and as a result, none of my retainers voted any objections. They merely lowered their eyes sadly. Meanwhile, wait a minute, he said with the most mana. You don't know which has the most mana right now. Meanwhile, Jonsara sighed in relief. She tightly hugged her baby and the magic tool she had stolen from Conrad to her chest, wearing the expression of a mother who wished to protect her beloved child more than anything else. A sight made me feel conflicted, to say the least. As this went on, Conrad stood in a daze. Not only had his lifeline been stolen from him, but now his father had cut him off completely. Feline looked at her little brother, tears streaming down her face. But if you do that, I will take him, I interrupted. If the uncontested guidance of the supreme gods will force him up the towering stairway, then living in the house of the gods will surely make no difference. Kashik and Jonsara grimaced. Unfortunately, Lady Rosemary, we do not have the wealth to support a blue priest, Jonsara said. Our expenses are only rising, and we will need Conrad's mana when he becomes a servant. Furthermore, while it is an honor for Feline to have become your retainer, Lady Rosemary, preparing everything that her new role requires is no easy matter. This is why I ask that you relieve her of duty. Oh, hell no! Feline looked away, now making the same face she had made when she had given up on her picture books in the winter playroom. She had probably survived at home all this time by enduring and making her true feelings behind the same expression, or masking her true feelings. It is my duty to protect my retainers, I declared. I will grant Feline a room in the castle and give her all that she needs for work, such that she will no longer burden your house. Feline, prepare your things with Lacelet. I have no intention of letting you go. She beamed a happy smile for a second, but then she looked at Conrad and lowered her eyes. Feline, we will take Conrad to the temple, I assured her. He will not die. You may trust Lady Rosemary. Now let us go, Lacelet said. Feline was promptly urged out of the room, but she walked with heavy footsteps, and continually glanced at her back at her little brother, reluctant to leave his side. Conrad, may I cast healing upon you, I asked. That would be a waste, Kashik began, but I silenced him with a look. I did not ask you, Kashik. I crouched down so that I was at eye level with Conrad. He was smaller than me, clearly unkempt and covered in wounds. You don't want to be in pain, right? I took out my staff, but this immediately sent Conrad into a panic. He recoiled and started to flail about as he tried to get away from me. A desperate fear in his eyes told me he had endured mana attacks in the past, so I made my staff vanish and turned my attention to Jonsara. This is a domestic matter, she repeated with a thin-lipped smile. Children need to be trained. It was clear to see that she didn't consider herself as having done anything wrong. I gave up using my staff and instead poured mana into my ring. O goddess of healing, Hellschmerz, of the goddess of water flute trains, exalted 12, hear my prayers. Lend me your divine power and grant me the power to heal those who have been hurt. Play the divine melody and cast the blissful ripples of your pure divine protection. Green light shot from my ring and enveloped Conrad. He looked down at himself with wide eyes as his wounds were healed and whispered, It doesn't hurt anymore. I am Rosemine, the lady of your older sister. This place has no magic tools for you. Will you live on as a servant, allowing the heat of your mana to devour you, or will you live in the temple? Lady Rosemine, Jonsara interjected. The mere sound of her voice caused Conrad to recoil again. We cannot afford... Shut up! I cut her off with a wave of my hand. I do not recall saying that he will become a blue priest. He shall join the temple as one without parents, as a gray priest. From that point onward, he will have nothing to do with this house. You may consider him as having passed away. I will miss using him as a servant, but I take no issue with him being removed from our lives entirely, Jonsara replied, suddenly in a much better mood. I hate her! I hate her! Meanwhile, Conrad stared at me, his expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. The orphanage will grant you food, clean bedding, and an education, I said to the young boy. At the very least, you will not be abused as you are now. If you wish to remain here, however, I will accept that. Now, would you like something delicious to eat? Conrad hesitated. His eyes wandered all over the place before eventually resting on me. I'm hungry. I see. Then you may leave with us once Feline is ready. Soon enough, Feline came back into the parlor with Lacelet. She looked relieved to see me standing protectively between Jonsara and Conrad. But her expression also seemed to be tinged with that resignation. Feline, I'm going to be taking Conrad to the temple, I said. Her brow trembled for a moment, then she glared at her father, her eyes full of anger and frustration. Conrad's magic tool is an heirloom from Mother. Why would you let Lady Jonsara take it? Why do you permit her tyranny, she demanded. The stolen magic tool had once belonged to Feline's birth mother. For Jonsara to have re-registered it with her own son's mana was unforgivable in Feline's eyes. Her lips trembled and she glowered as hard as she could at both her stepmother for her actions and her father for having allowed them to happen. The mana's already been replaced. Nothing can be done, and furthermore, it's normal to prioritize the child with more mana. Kashik replied, his attitude unchanged even in the face of the desperate pleas from his own daughter. Feline then knew that her words and feelings would never reach him. She looked down at the floor and squeezed her eyes shut, trying her hardest to hide her emotions, but she still couldn't hold back the tears. I can't believe they'd steal her late mother's heirloom. I may not have liked it, but nobles prioritizing children for more mana was something that I could at least understand. Stealing such a sentimental heirloom from a child, however. Ferdinand, how expensive are the magic tools given to babies? I asked. A new one will cost around 5 small golds, I suppose. The materials are also expensive, but that is because they require a significant amount of mana to create. I have never bought one myself, though. It made sense that he wouldn't know the exact price of magic tools for babies, considering that he had never been married. Feline, I will give you the money that you need, but I expect you to pay me back, I said. Use it to purchase your brother's magic tool. I will not like you to lose such a precious heirloom. An old magic tool that has had its mana forcibly overwritten will not be worth more than 3 small golds, Ferdinand said, taking out a card that shone like a rainbow. It looked a lot like a guild card, and this comparison only became more appropriate when he held it out to Koshik. We are going to buy the magic tool. We shall pay 3 small golds. You have no complaints, I imagine. Overwhelmed and unable to defy Ferdinand, Koshik swallowed hard and took out a similar card. He touched his to the one that Ferdinand had produced and then reached for the baby's magic tool. No, stop us at once, Jonsara explained. This is my baby's magic tool. You can always buy another one. No, who knows when they will be unable to, Jonsara protested, but Koshik wrenched the magic tool from her grasp and held it out to Ferdinand, who then set it down in front of me. I in turn handed the magic tool to Feline. Lord Ferdinand, Lady Rosemine, I thank you both ever so much, Feline said. She then hugged the magic tool close and continued to cry, but this time she wept tears of joy. I sighed in relief, glad to see that her smile had returned. After wiping her eyes, Feline looked up at her parents with resolve. Father, Lady Jonsara, I will now live in the castle as Lady Rosemine's retainer. Now that Conrad's going to the temple, I will never return here. The blood drained from Koshik's face, while Jonsara sighed in relief, 2 contrasting reactions to say the least. Meanwhile, Feline's grassy green eyes were shining with a firm, resolute light. A day will most likely never come when Dragarner, the goddess of time, weaves our threads back together, but I pray that you live in peace with the divine protection of the gods, Feline said. It was her final farewell, and with that she took Conrad by the hand and left what had once been her home. I hate that woman! I hate her! Hate her, hate her, hate her! If anybody has any conflicting opinions to mine, tell me why. Oh wait, hang on. How long have I been recording? I'll keep going. Last video that I made was only like less than 30 minutes, so I think I can make it longer this time. Taking Conrad to the temple. You are taking him to the temple now, Rosemine? This was not part of our plan, Ferdinand said the moment we left Feline's home. He was glaring down at me with the eyes of a parent about to tell their child to put a stray cat back where they had found it. Had we been alone in the temple, he certainly would have chastised me for helping everyone you see without thinking. Shut up! However, I knew him all too well now. Although he would complain and prioritize acting like a noble in public, beneath the surface he had conflicted feelings about children suffering from abuse. Because he had done it, he had been through it himself. He wouldn't abandon them unless there was significant reason preventing him from getting involved. I am the temple's orphanage director. It would be beyond me to abandon a child in need. Could you have abandoned him, Ferdinand? Fine, I would like to go to the temple and get this over with, but you have many underage guard knights with you. We must first return to the castle. Hartmut smiled. One of the requirements for an apprentice scholar to be involved with the printing industry is being capable of entering the temple and speaking with competent merchants. Please do bring me with you, Lord Ferdinand, he said. It was written on his face that he spoke less out of a pardon for his job, and more because he wanted to see the saint's temple for himself. But perhaps that was just my imagination. Either way, I could use his justification to bring Feline along too. Ferdinand, surely there is no issue with us bringing the apprentice scholars, I said. They are going to be visiting the temple soon enough anyway, so... Excuse me, Lady Rosemine, Judith shot her hand up. I want to do guard duty with Angelica. It is one thing to have the apprentice scholars come with us, but apprentice guard knights are only allowed to work in the nobles' quarter. We can decide whether to expand your duties in a meeting with Ehrenfest, but you must return to the castle for today, Ferdinand said. He glanced at Judith, Laisletta, Lenore, and Cornelius in turn, while writing a white bird letter to my attendant stating that we were coming to the temple with an orphan. Judith hung her head. She couldn't defy orders from Ferdinand, and so she brought out her high beast in preparation for going back to the castle. I feel for you, Judith, but I wasn't allowed to go to the temple before I came of age either. You should hurry and come of age too, Angelica said. She puffed out her chest with a bit of pride, while bringing out her high beast. Angelica, Judith smiled. Angelica, what kind of place is the temple? Angelica looked up as she pondered the question, then she smiled in turn. A delicious place. Huh? I guess the food there is delicious, but still. After receiving an answer like that, I can understand why Judith looked so utterly bewildered. My personal chefs are there, so the food served from the temple is the same as produced in the Royal Academy, I explained. That is what Angelica is trying to say. What? That's so much better than what we get at the Night Storm. What else is different? Judith asked, her violet eyes sparkling as she looked up at Angelica. Angelica paused and thought again, then she clapped a fist into her palm. The temple was tough. What? Judith looked at me for an explanation, but not even I knew what was meant this time. I shook my head, which prompted Angelica to explain. In the temple, everyone has to do paperwork like scholars. I trained with Lord Eckert there too, so it just felt like a tough place in every way. Angelica's baseline was utterly bizarre. Cornelius was shaking his head, having been to the temple before, while those who hadn't simply looked on in confusion. Oh gosh, it's so romantic for you to look forward to training with your betrothed. I'm jealous, Judith said. Wait, what part of that was even the slightest bit romantic? As Judith squealed with delight, I concluded that her baseline for things was equally bizarre. It was hard to tell whether Angelica and Judith were on the same page at all, and while everyone was stunned by it, not everyone was stunned in the same way. Lisletta, Angelica's little sister, opened her eyes wide and looked between Angelica and me in disbelief. Everyone does scholar work. Are you telling me that my sister does paperwork? She exclaimed. No! I guard the door. All by myself, Angelica replied with a heroic expression, spurring everyone to start nodding to themselves. They knew her grades. She couldn't possibly have been capable of doing paperwork. I thought for a moment that you were being a burden to Lady Rosemine, not just in the Royal Academy, but in the temple as well, Lisletta said. Please continue to refrain from spoiling the paperwork, sister. Right, her temple attendants are really good, so they know not to give me anything. Just how much did Angelica mess things up when she tried helping with paperwork? I was starting to feel exceedingly uneasy, but Lisletta didn't provide any further details. Instead, she just summoned her high beast. Enough chatter. Rosemine, prepare to leave, Ferdinand said. Allow the child and your apprentice scholar to ride with you in your high beast. I want everyone who needs to be guarded together. Okay. After seeing off the underage retainers who were going back to the castle, I gestured Hartmut, Feline, and Conrad into Leslie. Conrad looked relieved about leaving home, and while Feline was holding his hand to reassure him, her own expression was clouded. Hartmut must not have seen my bigger Leslie up close before because he started looking around everywhere the moment he was inside. Hartmut, please sit quietly. I do not answer questions while driving. Who asked you questions while you were driving? Justice. Hartmut chuckled in response, perhaps imagining the scene. Oh, Hartmut would do the same thing if he could. I shot up into the sky, and Leslie, following after Ferdinand, at which point Conrad let out a cry of surprise. He had evidently never ridden a high beast before. We soared through the air and made our way to the temple with guard knights surrounding us. Our destination wasn't too far from Feline's home, since lay nobles lived at the south end of the nobles' quarter close to the north gate. We passed over the nobles' gate and arrived at the front entrance of the temple's nobles section. Welcome back, High Bishop, High Priest. Fran and Monica were waiting for us alongside Ferdinand's attendants. Even Wilma had come out since a new orphan was arriving. I will compose the documentation for the new orphan, Ferdinand informed me. You give him food or what have you. As instructed, I took Conrad and the others to the orphanage director's chambers, where I then asked Nicola to start preparing food. My apologies for the suddenness of all this, I said to her. Fourth bell was about to ring anyway. This is perfect timing. While Nicola was preparing food, I introduced my temple attendants to Feline and Hartmut. These are Fran, Zom, Monica, and Wilma. I have entrusted Wilma with taking care of the orphanage. Nicola is currently preparing the food, while Gil and Fritz are in the workshop. I will introduce them to you later. For everyone, these are Feline and Hartmut retainers in the castle and apprentice scholars. They will soon be visiting the temple to assist with the printing industry. Nicola started bringing in dishes while I was introducing everyone. Each plate made a quiet clink as it was set down. Today we have bacon, fluffy bread, and vegetable soup, Nicola said. This meal is a bit simple since we hadn't planned for your return, Lady Rosemine. Furthermore, we have sweets at the side. I must admit, I made them in a hurry. Nicola placed on the table some crepes with thoroughly beaten cream and rum toff wrapped inside. I ate one and then everyone else began eating as well. Feline and Hartmut were immediately taken aback when they tasted the sweets for themselves. See, sweets like these are served at the temple? Only for Lady Rosemine, Angelica explained between graceful mouthfuls of crepe. Lord Ferdinand doesn't care much about sweets, so they aren't served in his chambers. So Hartmut, the temple is delicious, isn't it? Guard knights took turns to eat, and Angelica's not higher status dictated that she will always eat first. Daniel watched us with a longing hand on his stomach as he carried out guard duty and shrugged as Hartmut and Feline delighted in the sweets. Those in the orphanage here are given the leftovers of the Blue Priests in the form of divine gifts, so their food is better than that served in the Knight's dorm. There's plenty to go around too, Daniel explained. The orphans are also taught to read and do math before being baptized, meaning they can serve Blue Priests as attendants or join Lady Rosemine's workshop to make books. The Grey Priests are devoted to the teachings of the gods, and there are none who commit acts of violence. I imagine Conrad's life will be much better here. Feline's eyes widened in surprise, then she gave a genuine sigh of relief. That is good to hear, she said. Fran, how much longer do we have before the High Priest arrives, I asked. I wish to write a letter to the planting company, and I will need Gil or Fritz to deliver it. Have you decided on a date to sell the books? Fran asked while preparing my desk for writing a letter. It seemed that the workshop had already finished preparing to sell in the castle. Lady Rosemine, may I observe to see what kind of letters you write? Hartmut asked. Certainly, I replied. Hartmut watching meant I would need to write in strict formal language, and this struggle would only continue once more scholars began arriving in the temple. Putting something like, I came first in class at the Royal Academy, isn't that awesome? Simply wasn't an option, and with that in mind, I wistfully started writing my letter. Just as I finished, Ferdinand came with the necessary paperwork for Conrad to be accepted into the orphanage. He apparently wanted to leave a special record, since while the children of nobles had been taken in as blue priests in the past, never had one been taken in as an apprentice grey priest. Ferdinand and I sat next to each other at the table, while Feline and Conrad sat opposite us. Angelica and Hartmut stood behind me, while Daniel despaired of the crates being taken away. He had seemingly missed his chance to eat one. Oh, call Daniel, poor guy. Now then, we will temporarily take Conrad into the orphanage, I said. Since orphans and grey priests can be purchased, you need only save up enough money, Feline, then you and your brother can be reunited. Ferdinand immediately fixed me with a harsh glare. Hold it. Where do you expect him to live? He cannot live in the room you have granted Feline in the castle. She will need to save enough to buy an entire estate, and that is no simple task. Furthermore, no matter how hard either of them works, that child can no longer become a noble. But why not? We retrieved the magic tool, so if she saves up enough money to have his baptism ceremony, or before his baptism ceremony, I trailed off, he had managed to reclaim the magic tool for children that had used to belong to Feline's mother. If we put new face stones into it, surely Feline will just need to buy Conrad when she was able. That was the assumption I had made, at least, but it appeared that living as a noble wasn't quite that easy. Feline set the heirloom on her lap and then stroked it. Her eyes lowered sadly. Lady Rosemine, money can be saved and borrowed, but the mana is lost, she said. I didn't understand, though. The tool was right there. Ferdinand sighed at my confusion and explained. You must not consider yourself on the same level as a late noble child without even enough mana to be a suitable successor. You may have been compressing mana since long before your baptism, but you are an exception. Most cannot dye multiple phase stones in the blink of an eye. Lay nobles use magic tools such as that one to prevent their mana from being mixed in with others, and then spend years preparing phase stones to be used in lectures. Lord Ferdinand is correct. Conrad is already almost 5, and all the phase stones he saved up until now have been lost. He no longer has enough time, even with the mixed tool and the phase stones returned to him. No way, I murmured. I had been sure that now that they were away from their abusive parents and receiving my support, they would even eventually be able to live happily as siblings again. But reality was not so forgiving. Ferdinand rubbed his temples, having never considered that I actually intended to return Conrad to noble society. The most you can do as the High Bishop and orphanage director is save the life of a child deemed unnecessary by his parents. You cannot support his life as a noble, he said. Furthermore, it will be problematic for you to show such obvious favoritism to just one of your straight retainers. Be careful of all that you say and do. You are the Archduke's adopted daughter, and it is precisely because you were made High Bishop that you must know what lines are not to be crossed. I could only bite my lip in response. He was right. I couldn't do the same for every noble child who was put before me, and putting some above others based on my feelings would only make me the same as Bezin wants. Don't look so down, Lady Rosemine. Feline looked between Conrad and me, then she gave a bright smile. I feel at peace just knowing Conrad has a safe place to live. I had feared more than anything that he would be left in that place and climb the towering stairway. On top of that, you even recovered our mother's heirloom for us. I am grateful from the bottom of my heart. I will serve you with my absolute all and return the money that you lent me as soon as possible. I will even save up enough to buy Conrad so that we can live together, even if not as fellow nobles. He is my only brother, after all. I saw Feline and Conrad smile at each other, and my feelings on the matter settled. The world would be a better place without mana prejudice, and without children dying from having their magic tool stolen. Ferdinand, how many children are in situations like Conrad's? I asked. Magic tools are expensive, so I would say there are likely others among the lay nobles. Is there any way we can save them? And commoners with the devouring, too, if possible, I asked. Those questions earned me exasperated looks from not just Ferdinand, but Hartmut and Feline as well. You would overreach that much while you are already so busy with the printing industry? You must be a fool, Ferdinand said. But does it not bother you? Plus, given the duchy's mana shortage, I believe things could change a bit if we accepted them into the orphanage. The shortage was a serious problem, and we wanted to scrape up as much mana as we could get. The mana shortage is temporary. What will you do when the nobility repopulates? The inefficiencies you introduce will be shaved away first. Rather than being driven by emotion, you must think of the future. Right now, you are considering only what is right in front of you. I took a deep breath. You had a point, but the children would surely be able to use their mana to secure them some other job to do. Perhaps they could work on finding future employment while helping to fill the land of mana. They could prove useful to society while earning their own income. Even if they couldn't live as nobles, there were other paths available to them. Ones that were much better than death, in my opinion. What can I do? You must stop contemplating this, Ferdinand said, interrupting my train of thought. In almost all cases, when you begin to contemplate an issue, things shift in an unfathomable direction. Furthermore, something this large will require the Ob to make any final decisions. Do not think of such extraneous matters before you first clean up your own business. Understood. Still, I want to think about this. I clenched my fist under the table, and in an instant Ferdinand sighed from beside me. You are letting it all show on your face, he said with a glare, prompting me to raise my hands to my cheeks. Before you throw noble society into complete chaos by barging into the domestic problems of strangers and giving unrequested assistance, finish your printing work. Is your wish not to become a librarian? One cannot become a scholar without first gathering experience as an apprentice. In short, Ferdinand was admonishing me for trying to do too much at once. The date for selling books in the castle is fast approaching. Have you finished organizing it with the planting company? Indeed, Fran has reported that the workshop is fairly ready too, I replied. Even during the 2 years I was asleep, Charlotte and the others had communicated through Ferdinand to set up the planting company's book fair. It had consequently become a regular event, and was looking forward to seeing how it turned out this year. Okay, I think I'm going to have to end this here, and I will see you all on the next one.